Hello, hello.
Hey, Alex.
Welcome, everybody. We got quite a few attendees registered for this one, so we're going to wait 3, 4 minutes, give folks a chance to get in the door.
Awesome. Awesome.
I love it.
Alex, I always love in the green room to kind of ask a couple of different questions to get the ball and the juices flowing.
Yeah.
Uh, favorite meal of the day?
Ooh, um, ooh, that's a good one. I want breakfast worse than any other meal of the day because I always wake up hungry. But my favorite kind of food is definitely dinner food.
Uh,
So I probably
see,
have to go with dinner.
see, I love breakfast for dinner, right? I love
Right, steak and eggs. Yeah, yeah.
making eggs, pancakes, waffles. That being said, you can't pry me away from a nice grilled like steak on the grill. Oh,
Right,
I
right.
love that. So
I being from Maryland, being that I now live in Maryland, I'm actually from Delaware. Being that I now live in Maryland, I probably committed a cardinal sin by not saying brunch
yeah,
because
probably.
Maryland is known for brunch and all you can drink
Yeah.
brunches. So it's a full day affair around here, and it's one that usually winds up with you on the couch in a food coma at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon and not remembering what happened to the rest of your day.
Yeah, I remember those days. Brunch, like we used to do Sunday brunch here. There's a restaurant not far from ours that does a Bloody Mary bar, and let me tell you, this thing has got a like 14-foot long tables with all kinds of everything you could possibly
Yeah,
imagine in your Bloody Mary. And yeah, thank goodness for Uber, right?
there's a bar called the Starboard in Dewey Beach, Delaware, that has a room the size of my office dedicated to Bloody Mary fixins. So
Yeah.
if you're ever at Dewey Beach, that is the thing to not miss. But I'm not a Bloody Mary person, so I don't.
No, me neither. Me neither. No,
I
but
like my tomato soup hot with a grilled cheese sandwich dipped in it.
perfect. Yeah.
I want it over ice in a glass. For
Awesome.
those of you hopping in, we're just kind of ranting here for a few minutes. We're feel free to let us know where you guys are coming in from. But we had a lot of folks register for this one, so we're gonna wait till 3 or 4 minutes after to get started. So, but feel free to let us know where you guys are at. It is a nice day here in Maryland. I can't complain. We got some weather in the 60s before. We're getting maybe a full week of fall here
Wow.
as opposed to the
Awesome.
normal 2 days.
Awesome. Yeah, New England's been great. Like I've been able to get out and start to fly my drone this weekend. I'm going to go out and try to get a bunch of those fall colors here that
I always
everybody
get some cool
loves.
pictures up there. Yeah.
Yeah, that everybody loves to see in New England. So, I bought me one of those little play drone things to play with not too long ago, and I've been really like getting daring. Like last weekend, I took it down the river behind our house and like flew under the trees and flew around the bridge. It was like, wow, but it was a lot of fun. So,
That's awesome.
but yeah, fall colors are starting to come. So, keep an eye on on my LinkedIn and stuff, and you'll probably see some fun drone.
My family in Michigan took a color trip up to the UP, and that's actually a thing up there. Like they drive around and go up into the Upper Peninsula and all that just to go see the colors because the southern part of Michigan doesn't always get them.
Yeah, well, that's this week in New England, right? So whatever politically correct term for the Monday holiday that was this week, indigenous whatever day it was, that's like leaf peeping time. Like
Oh, okay.
the highway up in the notch was literally like 7 or 8 miles of like stopped traffic in the leaf peeping. It's crazy
That's
time.
adorable at all, but it probably gets frustrating.
Yeah, well, for those that live up there, thank goodness, like but
Yeah,
I
exactly.
go up on like a random Tuesday when nobody's there.
Jim calls them the Flatlanders. I love that. So it's interesting how every area has their own slang for where they live. Because over where I am, and I am on the eastern shore of Maryland, which is a very small sliver of dirt between Delaware and civilized Maryland. And we basically refer to ourselves as shorebillies over here because we're not hillbillies. There is not a hill to be found. We are the Flatlanders, but Jim, we are shorebillies. We are not Flatlanders. So
There you go.
get it right. If you see a
Yeah,
Maryland tag, yeah.
I won't tell you what they call the people from Massachusetts, but Mass kind of rhymes with something.
Right. Now I've heard that one too. I have family up there, so
Yeah.
and they may have earned it. So let's get started. It's 5 after. Everybody should be in here. Thanks everybody for coming and hanging out. I'm hoping hoping we can open your eyes to some different concepts around policy and procedure today. It's something that admittedly I wasn't real good at my MSP. And since I've left the MSP and gone over to the vendor side, I've gotten to hang out with people like Brian Blakely and Matt Lee and Tim. And you guys have opened my eyes to policy being more than what we did with it, and we didn't do well with it. So I want to kind of step into and talk about why policy templates set you up for failure and what you can do about it. But before we do, I'll let Tim introduce himself. You guys can kind of get a little bit of who these guys are that are leading this thing today.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks for that introduction. You know, I'm among the fanboys, right? You mentioned Matt, you mentioned Brian. Like, there's a lot of good people in this space, you know, trying to help MSPs solve, you know, what seems like very complex problems, but as you'll learn today, we can distill them down into pieces that you as MSPs can actually be doing. I'm Tim Golden. I'm the founder of ComplianceRisk.io. I've been an MSP under Vital Tech Services since 2006, providing services to the federal government all around NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technologies. When I do a webinar, by the way, if I happen to say an acronym and I don't quantify that or define that, Alex gets to drink.
Oh boy, that's going to be a problem. There's a way too much word salad in your vocabulary for me to end up.
Every time I use like GRC, HIPAA, NIST, okay, that's 4, right? So
I'm going to be in trouble.
You're going to be in trouble. So, yeah, you know, we pulled compliance risk out of Vital Tech to have both separation of duties from the compliance work and the actual technical implementations of that work. And then what we've really found was that MSPs like yourself are really struggling to wrap their head around building out a compliance practice.
Yeah.
So we started with the peer group, right? You know, we have weekly meetings, peer group, the teach to fish model, right? And from that, we've learned that, you know, MSPs are learning great stuff as part of the peer group, but they don't have the bench strength. So now we have compliance as a service where we work alongside you and we fish with you.
Well, you know, speaking to that bench strength as an MSP owner, you know, a lot of the guys in this room probably have a similar story. 2004, my job got outsourced to India. I was teaching. Thank you for calling Dell Technical Support. This is Alex. Actually, that was 2002. I went to work for a small break fix computer shop. Signed a non-compete. So I left there after a few months for personal disagreements and worked out my non-compete, you know, spent 2 years basically doing nothing, and then bought a small break fix shop in Dover, Delaware, ran it for 16 and a half years, turned it into an MSP in 2008, kind of grew up along with the business, right? I wasn't a business owner. I was a 27-year-old kid.
Right.
So there was no compliance practice. I was it. And I was out over my skis a lot. And I think a lot of MSP owners come from the humble beginnings, right? You know, we were just a guy who thought we could fix people's problems. Right. So we did. And the industry just kept moving, kind of the same way cybersecurity keeps moving the goalpost on our customers. It kept moving the goalpost on us. Exactly. And you know, you have to keep learning the stuff that requires a little more education, a little more knowledge of the subject matter expert knowledge, right? Not just Google foo, but you know, the ability to master some of this subject matter expert stuff. And as I grew into my MSP, I was a sales guy and launched Lifecycle Insights because we saw the problems that MSPs were having around sales and account management and doing those things properly. We're finding that as we do risk assessments, as we do that whole gap analysis, one of the big problems that comes up is everybody just has these policy deficits where we wrote a company policy, we stuffed it in a drawer, we haven't looked at it since 2014, and we're just moving on, right? And the world is changing. That is not quite acceptable anymore. You know, Matt Lee said to me when we did a boot camp with that crew, he said what were his exact words? Because this is the most basic what you actually do policy is way better than the most aspirational you know, copy paste policy. And you know, it really stands to reason that all of us who were out there in 2008 going, oh crap, I got to have some policy, let me go find my security awareness training platform, download them and run with some policy. That just doesn't work anymore, just like so many other things, like the fact that a firewall and antivirus isn't a security product. So anyway, back to who we are. I launched Lifecycle Insights, kind of got over here on the vendor space, met Tim. Tim made me smarter. Matt and Brian have made me smarter. And we realized that this was a conversation MSPs needed to have. So as Tim and I ramble and run away from our slides, and we'll probably do that all afternoon, just based on our two personalities, let's try and stay on track and go back and talk about, I think we've talked a little bit about the status quo, right? But you know, a lot of MSPs were just being reactionary with policy. Our customer comes to us and says, hey, HIPAA says I have to have a policy. Can you help me create it? Or, you know, PCI says I have to have a policy. Can you help me create it? And so we go out and we Google, and SANS.org gives us a template we can download, and we do a find and replace, and we change bracket company name bracket, and we fill in the company name, right? We might cross out a couple lines where we go, nope, we're never going to do that. And we stamp the policy good. We wave it under all the employees' noses. We stuff it in the drawer, and we hope to not have to look at it for 6 or 7 years.
It's funny that you say that. So I talked to a customer a couple days ago, and I actually posted this on LinkedIn. Like, they haven't updated their employee handbook, like, let alone all the other fun stuff, their handbook in 14 years.
Yeah.
Like, I think E&O laws have probably changed.
Well, and think about what acceptable use of a PC was.
Yeah.
In 14 years ago, or even 4 years ago, versus what it is today, right? And you just leave yourself in so much risk. And from my side of the business, we spend an exorbitant amount of time talking to MSPs about how to put yourself in a defensible position.
Exactly.
Right? God forbid something goes wrong, and we live in a world where the likelihood of that is high. Sometimes we don't like to talk about it, but I find that if we just talk about it, sometimes we get better results.
Right.
We need to make sure we're doing the right things to put ourselves in that defensible position. And I think policy is one of the places that helps.
And you see, and that's where some of the policy templates or things you can find off the internet kind of get you stuck, right? You know, if you write a document that says we do these things, and then you don't actually do those things.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, this is where in some of that, you know, these templates and the things in these packs or whatever, like, don't get me wrong, there are really good templates as starting points and jumping off points. I'm not against the concept of a template. Actually, we have a whole library of documents to help start and get you going. The problem is that they're not tailored, they're not customized, they're not managed, all of those stuff that we'll get into here in some of the other slides going forward.
Right. And Jonathan's way ahead of himself, but he's way ahead of us at least. And he's asking, but policies are only the beginning. What do you do about the procedures that come from the policies? I think that's we'll get there. But I think it's a great point, because if the policy isn't what you actually do, then how could you possibly tie a procedure to the part that you don't actually do, right? So I think Jonathan's touching on something that to me is a little bit of some of the checks and balances, that if you do this process right, if you go through a policy and tie the procedures to it properly, you'll notice where that SANS.org policy was too aspirational for your organization, and you created something that you just couldn't do. So, you know, a lot of this, really
Jonathan wasn't a plant, but he's asking all the right questions. So we're going to get there. So,
he's obviously already headed down this journey, right? And that's great.
That's awesome.
If you're not to that point, if you're not already to where Jonathan's at, don't freak out, right? This is a journey for all of us. Everybody starts where they are. We hope to be a little better at this tomorrow, and a little better by the end of the year, and a little better next year. You know, all of this is a journey, so don't feel bad about it. We'll get into, process and records management kind of as we go. But, you know, I'd like to talk briefly about some of the problems that do come up, because a lot of your customers are going to give you well, why do you care if I have a policy that dictates X, Y, or Z?
Right.
And we're hearing stories. Tim, you probably can do a better job of me than telling the insurance claim story.
Sure. So, you know, there are instances where your Google find better than me. Like, I'm not going to insult your intelligence, right? There have been claims in very large insurance companies, that's all over the internet, where a company had a document that said, we're doing ABC 1, 2, and 3. Take 2FA, for example, right? Because we all, as we all talk about 2FA, and one of the requirements for cyber insurance, 2FA, right? So they had documentation that said, we do 2FA, or they filled out their insurance questionnaire with 2FA. But they didn't actually do that. And when the breach happened, because it's not a matter of if, we know that, when the breach happened, because of potential 2FA wasn't in place, they go back to the documentation, the evidence, the defensibility that they're looking at that says, well, you said you do this, but you don't actually do this, so we're not paying the claim. And we're seeing more and more of those kinds of things happen in the industry, right? I could go on and on about the number of CIOs, CISOs, CEOs, boards that are being held accountable for things within their business that are either written inappropriately or just not written at all. Right? And so this is where this policy piece and where these templates can get you in trouble with. I downloaded a template. It said we do 2FA, but we don't do 2FA, and something happens.
Yeah, and that you touched on something that, my God, we could dovetail off of this 100 ways and spend all day on the wrong topics or the not topics we talked about discussing. But I would ask yourself, as an MSP today, are you even meeting with the boards? Does the board of directors at the nonprofit or at the company that you work for, do they even know what the company policies are? Do they know that you exist and what you are and are not doing? Or does that stop at the executive level? Because ultimately, sometimes the board is accountable, and more, at least in finance, we're seeing banks are being required to have cybersecurity expertise on the board. So there's a lot of opportunity here to have a conversation at a higher level around policy and procedure. And we'll get into the anatomy of a good policy in a minute, and we'll talk about where some of this almost requires the board to be done right. But before we get that far, I like to go back and talk about supportability, because at my MSP, we had a scare in town, and it wasn't my customer, thank goodness, but an attorney wired somebody in an attorney's office, a paralegal or a secretary or something, wired the closing money from a real estate deal to a Nigerian prince somewhere, right? And the attorney's mailbox had been hacked. The hacker sat and watched the mailbox. When they saw a real estate deal close of sufficient value, they immediately responded and said to this clerk who they thought was going to pay the bill, hey, the customer is out of town, is doing another real estate deal with these funds and needs them wired here immediately.
Yep.
The attorney's office wired $300,000 out the door.
Yeah. It happened in Peterborough, New Hampshire here. The town, basically, I think it was 2.5 million that they wired out of their employee benefits fund to some, Nigerian.
In a town, you're probably fairly well protected, right? I mean, it sucks.
Yeah.
But somebody might get fired. Let's talk about it from an attorney's side.
Yeah.
That attorney got notice from the real estate owner's attorney that said, you have 2 days to produce $300,000, or we're going after your bar license. Your stupidity is not my fault or my problem, right? So there can be real human consequences to this. As a result of that, I literally went to every one of my customers and said, we need to write an electronic funds transfer policy, and you need to provide it to me. Is there an MSP on this call who asks your customers to produce all of their policies to you as part of supporting them?
Yeah.
If you don't know what the right behavior is in their organization, how can you expect a tier 1 or a tier 2 engineer to provide the right level of support? And I love to give this story because it just makes people scratch their heads, and it's a little far-fetched. But let's just say for a second, you've got a brand new engineer, right? Tim just hired a brand new engineer at his MSP. The guy's eager. He really respects Tim. He wants to make a name for himself. He's going all out and giving amazing support to all these folks who call it. He logs into Tim's PSA. He takes a phone call. The phone call pops. The person identifies themselves. Hey, I'm the CFO from XYZ company. He goes in and pulls up that person. The PSA pops up and says, VIP, make sure this person gets everything they need, blah, 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 right? Oh my God, how many of us have alerts like that in our PSA? There's a lot of them out there. And this VIP says, hey, I need to wire some money and I'm having some trouble with the banking system. Could you remote into my PC and help me with this? What is the right answer for that engineer? Are they trained to go look at the corporate policy and make sure that they know who has to sign off, who has to give authorization, whether we have to have voice authorization or face-to-face authorization, or what happens in the event of an electronic funds transfer? What
are the checks and balances?
Or is that eager kid who's just trying to make a name because he wants Tim to respect him going to go ahead and just do the thing? Right. So we need to know what those policies are. And I will tell you this, probably 60% of my clients, after hearing that story, said, yeah, our electronic funds transfer is simple. No, we
Okay.
don't do it, right? But
Yeah.
and then if I have that policy on hand, it's easy for my engineers to go and find it. So we turned IT Glue into a policy repository, and through my Glue, we were actually using that tool to, and you guys can have your fun with the Kaseya stuff going on right now. I'll ignore all that. But my point is, like, you need to have a way to share that stuff between your help desk team and your customer. And when we did a gap analysis, when we found a policy that we hadn't been informed on, the best answer they could get was yellow, was needs attention. Even if they said it's done, I just updated it and had everybody sign it, it's filed away, it's perfect, we just finished it, I'm still going to say, until we've been informed, we can't properly support you. And that goes to acceptable use policies, it goes to controlled access policies, it goes to encryption policies and data destruction policies. How can you support someone's network if you don't know all those things? You're just doing them your way.
Right. And, I always live and die by the, if it's not written down, it doesn't exist. But yet I'm still held accountable.
Yeah. And if it's not written down and shared with you, is really the expansion that MSPs, I think, need to take on that. And then, of course, we get into problems that I didn't even realize, that if a policy is not current, it's ignored by the auditors.
Yep.
So,
well, not only is it ignored by the auditors, but the auditors are now, they've been doing this work for years, most of them anyways, for that matter. They can spot that SANS template a mile away and like, no,
I bet they can.
We're good here. Or they can spot the, Johnny's go buy my policy pack. Like, they can spot that stuff a mile away. And all they need to do is look at the first couple of paragraphs and realize, oh, you have no revision control because the last entry on your revision entry was 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, none of that, like, they can spot that stuff a mile away. So now you're failing audits, right? And in the CMMC world, right, for those of us that work in that CMMC space, it's pass fail, right? Auditor pulls up an SSP or an acceptable use or any one of the 14 or 15 policies in the CMMC space, and they look at it and go, fail, done, gone, $100,000 out the door. Call me back when you think you're done.
So, I think auditors added an interesting component to it. And as all three of these kind of combine up to just be risk, God forbid you have a breach. Let's say you're in HIPAA or some other, I'm going to call them lightly regulated environment where you can self-attest, right? Which really is kind of a joke. But as soon as the insurance company gets involved, or as soon as the lawyers get involved, even if you self-attested, if this policy work isn't being done right, you're still going to get just raked over the coals and create a bunch of problems for yourself that don't have to exist. So now that we've scared everybody to death over what bad policy looks like, what does better look like?
Yeah, and this is really what we're bringing, and we'll talk about Polygon in a few minutes. And this is kind of how we've brought forward our policy documentation process, right? Sort of in this 4-phase piece, right? Alignment, authorization, adoption, assessment, right? So in this alignment phase, right, this is where you actually begin to write the meat of the document that not only kind of talks about the risk frameworks, the RMFs, the risk management frameworks that you have to adhere to in this particular policy, so that you're meeting those control objectives for that framework, for that compliance or that requirement. You are also writing this to corporate culture, right? We all have, every business has a little bit different culture and how they do things. Like for us, like 14 character passwords is our minimum, right? And for some of your other clients, maybe it's 12, maybe it's 22, who knows? But, writing that policy to align with the culture.
Yeah. And it can be as simple as, hey, at my office, folks can surf Facebook at lunchtime, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of your clients, that probably is not okay. But if you give your tech a laptop and he's watching a Twitch stream on his lunch break, are you going to lose your mind? Is your customer going to lose their mind? I think those are two totally different reactions, especially depending on who and where we're talking about.
Right. So corporate culture, and then most importantly, actual business practices in place. Don't write a policy that says you use 14 characters, but you're only actually using 8, right? That's just an example, but actual business practices in place. And this is where you, as the MSP that's providing services to them, know what they're doing, know what you have in place, right? Because those are the services you're providing. You can actually put those technical implementation statements. Wow, that's a mouthful. In those policy that says, as the MSP, we're doing this for you, and put that in the document, and then you have all the other pieces and evidence and stuff down the road that can back that up, right? So alignment to a risk management framework, to corporate culture, and to actual business practices in place. Now, for us, this whole 4-stage process was all manual. And our team would spend anywhere from 8 to 12 hours per month per policy dealing with this 4-stage process that we have in place that we've now automated and brought to a SaaS app, which we'll talk about in a few minutes.
We were way more efficient, Tim. We just didn't do it.
Well,
I spent 0 time on it. Yeah, I knocked it all out.
But as an MSP, right? So we talked about defensibility, we talked about resiliency, we talked about we talked about all the reasons why we should be doing it. Now we're talking about the how. What is the process, right? MSPs, at least, most of us, we're pretty process oriented. Like, we're doing this work. Like, I think Jonathan pointed out earlier, like, we have a procedure for onboarding, for offboarding, for password resets. We're kind of doing that work.
We're procedure driven, right? We just don't necessarily build the policies that the procedures support. And that's where, as MSPs, right, we are very, very good at process. I give MSPs a hard time because I tell them sales is just another process, and they're really good at process. They shouldn't be so bad at it, but that's a talk for another webinar. But the point is, if you can build 27 policies, really all you have to do is layer them up and decide which procedure if you can build that many processes and procedures, you can really just attach those to your policies. You have a lot of the supporting documentation and a lot of the work done. It's really about knowing what to do, right? And I think that's where a lot of folks get confused. So we spent the first half of the webinar kind of running down policy templates. And then we're going to go turn right around and tell everybody that not all policy templates are created equal, or maybe it's how you policy template that matters. Expand on this a little, because there's, every time we bring somebody onto a Lifecycle Insights webinar, we always tell everybody, our platform doesn't do anything you can't do manually. We just make it faster. To steal from something that Tim said to me a long time ago that I really love and have since adopted, we make the wheel rounder and faster, right? So we make it easier for this thing to happen. You've kind of done the same thing with policy. And so if you wanted to do it manually, the old spreadsheet version or the old, chisel and hammer version, what does that look like today?
And so this is what we've literally been doing since 2006, is this, manual process. We have a document. That document has a structure. That structure contains, as Jonathan pointed out, records management stuff, especially around version control, authorization, adoption, all those things.
Stop there. Let's explain what records management is, because to the typical MSP, that is probably quite complex language.
Yeah, I guess to dumb it down in sort of like easiest terms is not only from a version perspective, right? So we start with version 1, and then 6 months later, we review it again. It's maybe 1.1, or we've had a significant change in the organization, so that policy needs to have a significant change. So it goes to version 2. So that kind of stuff, right? So that's part of records management, is version controls, right? But also the whole, I'm going to use the word life cycle, the whole life cycle of the document itself, right? Who's the owner? Who authored it? Who authorized it, right? And who signed off? Who's been trained? All of that sort of procedural pieces around that document. And then where is it stored? How is it stored? How is it shared? And like Alex, like you said, we can do this manually. I mean, we can do this in SharePoint, but let's face it, SharePoint,
right?
SharePoint is where documents go to die. Come on, let's face it, right? But not only that, but figure out permissions and sharing those documents. Like, SharePoint permissions is a pain in the neck. I know, I've been dealing with it for the last couple of weeks at our MSP, but not just that sharing, but heaven forbid you should email it, right? Here is our full business continuity plan that talks about reconstituting our business from the ground up. All you need is a credit card and this document that you just shared in plain text email for the world to get. Yeah.
So So I want to back up again because that was a great tangent, but there was something else in there that I don't want to be missed.
Okay, sorry, I might have
No,
missed.
that's great. But you talked about authorization,
Mm,
and I think it's interesting to talk through that because we mentioned earlier a lot of MSPs aren't really talking to their board, right?
it's a
So
great opportunity.
in a typical world, the policy gets written probably with some, hopefully with as a project from the MSP. They contribute or work alongside of the customer to collaborate on this policy. But who ultimately needs to approve a policy? Who ultimately needs to authorize this to be the gold stamp? This is the way this is the policy for our company.
I would say that that person is the compliance officer, but here it lies the problem. Who is the compliance officer at an organization of 6 people? Okay, who is, as part of their business structure, somebody is the ultimate authority, most likely the CEO, or maybe they have a CTO or a CFO, or a board in a nonprofit for that matter. Somebody, some human, and we're seeing this, like, I mean, look what happened to the Uber guy, different conversation, but somebody is ultimately responsible, right? They're the ones in the business that you should be having these conversations with. And as Alex was pointing out, this now elevates your conversation with your client to the next level of humans within that company, right? You go from, maybe the project manager that you've been working with forever, now to the CTO, to the CEO, maybe to the board, and having these risk-based conversations around policy.
Bye gatekeeper, right? Because now we're talking to the people at the top and we're aligning the policy with the way they run the business. We're getting authorization from them. We're showing them what an adoption process looks like. We're actually working our way through Tim's anatomy of a good policy. So I think that's super important. Talk to this template a little bit, because as part of showing up for this webinar, we're going to send you a template.
Yeah.
Not all templates are created equal. So we're going to send you what we think is a better template than some of what you get online. But there's some caveats to it. So talk through that.
Yeah, so obviously, as you're building out a policy, there are certain things to consider. Who's the audience? What's its scope? God bless you. What is it? What does it adhere to? The document that we'll be sending you after this webinar will kind of ask you a bunch of guided questions to consider as you're building out a policy. Not only that, but there are structural things within this policy, within any policy that you should have. As John pointed out when he talked about records management, there's a whole section around version control. There's a whole section around document authorization. There's a whole section around signature and sign off, right? A good policy will have these particular structures in place. Header, footer, like, a lot of the work that we do with our federal clients is marked as CUI. And for anybody that's doing work in the federal space, or
I'm going to be drunk, I'm telling you. There he goes with his acronyms.
Yeah, so CUI, controlled unclassified information. Basically, working in the federal government space, they label stuff. In fact, they're either under, that doesn't matter. Point is that these documents have a structure to them when you're building out these policies and procedures. What we're going to send you is a list of things to consider about why a policy. Is it a policy or a procedure, or is it both, maybe? And a bunch of series of questions to think about when you go to write a document, and then the actual structure of that document.
And structure is super important. And they should be consistent, right? The purpose of the template is to give you something that allows you to consistently write similar policy across the entire organization. But as an MSP, if you're trying to manage policy for 40 organizations, right, some consistent structure across all those organizations will help you again make that wheel rounder and faster, so that you can do it easier, you can do it quicker.
One of the things that auditors are gonna look at when they look at your documentation is, maybe you grabbed a template from Sans, and then maybe you grabbed a template from Johnny's template repo, and maybe you grabbed a template from GitHub, and now you have 3 different styles and structures of documents. And you hand this documentation package to an auditor, to an insurance company, and they're all over the map. And they're like, if their documentation is this crazy, I bet the rest of the company is too. So having that consistent structure of the documents goes a long way to proving that defensibility right out of the gate. Like, this, I hate to use the word branding, but it's almost like branding, right? Where you have
Yeah, no, absolutely.
consistent look and feel across what you do.
And attention to detail there shows attention to detail other places in the organization. I want to talk to audience too. You mentioned who is the audience for the policy.
Mhm.
And I always felt like the sans.org policies or the templates and everything that I would download were way over the head of the person who I was delivering them to if I was working with a true, really small business, right? A 10, 12, 15, 20 person a company. Some of these policies are written for government organizations, right? So I think it's important to talk through as well. Your audience really should dictate the language in that template, right? If you're a government organization, you want different language than if you're an important mom and pop shop that still needs to have some policy, right? Or if you're a mid-sized, small and medium business. So I think it's super important to think about the language of your customer. And we talk about it in sales, saying when we're having a conversation around sales, we want to talk about we want to talk about the business in the same language that they ring the cash register in, right? We want to know how they ring the cash register. We want to talk about that business to that point. And I think policy goes the same way. So if you're writing policy for, and Greg uses the phrase unregulated industry, I think it definitely makes sense.
Before you answer Greg's question, I want to talk about the language, right? Because an audience, right? I may not be a smart man, but so I put a link in chat. So plain language, right? Great website. 18F, awesome people, really helping to like understand vernacular that people can read and comprehend, right? I work for an educational company. They're very big on comprehension and reading. So 18F can really help you around defining plain language and writing stuff that people can understand and figure out. So I just wanted to make that key point. There's a link in chat to 18F. If not, you can Google 18F, but using things like plain language, and there's a whole website around how that can help you write these things to that audience.
And that's not just for your policy, right? It has to do with every communication you make with these folks. But so to Greg's question, if my client's in an unregulated industry, why should you spend any time writing and maintaining policy? You gave a strong argument for why not write anything down. Insurance won't pay if you have the wrong thing. Tim, you posted that back to just to hosts and panelists, not to everyone. So change your chat.
I can only do to hosts and panelists, and not everyone.
That means I must have really.
Yeah.
I should be a co-host. All right, I'll throw it out there for everyone. And maybe yep, I'm gonna get the link out there to you guys. Sorry about that. So there's the link. And so to Greg's point, insurance won't pay if you say you do something and then you don't do it. So why give them the written down policy to even combat with? And I think, Greg, that goes back to not just supportability of your client, because you have to know what that client expects to be able to support them. But part of any cybersecurity process program is having written down the way we do things over and over so that we know what good looks like. And if we don't have that measuring stick of a policy, because a policy really is just a measuring stick.
Yeah.
Right. It's a really fancy yardstick. If we don't have that measuring stick, we can't say, yes, we measure up to doing it right and secure, or no, we don't do anything right at all. And so it goes back to the whole conversation around, do we even know what we're doing if we have no method for measuring it and watching it? So I think you're going to find very quickly that, number one, more of your companies become, if not more regulated by insurance.
Yep.
And the insurance companies enforcing them to do these policies.
So I'll even just take it a step further. And, we get this a lot with, our clients and the MSPs that we work with on, well, my customers aren't regulated. They're not HIPAA or they're not CMMC. And then the next question I generally ask them is, what state are your clients in? Oh, well, they're all in California. Oh, do you have privacy protection stuff in place? Because, California privacy protection is a thing. New York has one. There's 44 states now that have privacy laws on the books, and there's a national one in the works, which means you need to have some kind of documentation that says what you're doing around privacy. Yeah. And heaven forbid you should have customers that service clients over in the UK, because then GDPR, all right, that I'm not going to quantify that acronym. So then, because you can Google it just as easily as the rest of us, then you need to deal with the privacy laws over in Europe and over in the other foreign, and you need documentation to support this.
And then the whole 9 yards. Yep. So are there, I want to just dovetail for a second to expand on Greg's point. Are there, in your opinion, some policies that MSPs can say, in reality, the customer is never going to really contribute to this policy. I'm just going to write for them their data protection policy or their data destruction policy.
Their incident response plan.
Yeah. So I think there are some of them that can be very templatized. My MSP destroys data the same way every time. I don't care who the customer is. We use the same service. We destroy the hard drives the same way. We hold things in retention the same way until the destruction company shows up. You can deliver some of these and lather, rinse, repeat for your clients. In other ones, you're going to need to sit down with the client and go in significant amounts of detail to make sure that it matches their business. And in any way, however you do it, even when you bring them your policy, right, we've got to get back to alignment and authorization. So we've got to get back to where our customer says, I authorize this policy, we adopt this policy, we've put it out to our team, and we've got.
Yeah, let me just key on the adoption, because we didn't talk about that too quickly. I'm cognizant of the time. What good is a password policy if you don't train your end users?
Or if well, I mean, it's even worse if you don't write it down.
Right. So right. So the adoption, is a huge piece of what, people miss in this process is, here's the document. Let's send it out to all of the end users for them to log into a platform, to them to look at, read, acknowledge, and sign off, quote, quote, air quotes, that, yeah, I've read this thing, and now the company has adopted this as a standard business practice, right?
So I'm gonna make Tim cry.
Yeah.
In my MSP days, I was meeting a new customer and I asked them about their password policy. And their internal IT guy, who we were doing supplemental IT on top of the internal IT guy. And this was, I don't know, 2018. It wasn't that long ago. I asked him about the password policy. I asked the business leader in front of me about the password policy, and they said, oh, we've never really written one. And the IT guy goes, oh, absolutely we have. And they went, and I went, well, can we find it somewhere? Can we look at it? He goes, oh no, it's an Active Directory. It's managed by AD.
Right. You have a group policy object, you have a procedure.
And he said, my policy is my group policy. And I went, what happens when somebody goes out and logs into Office 365 or name the SaaS application, right? These policies have to scale and they have to be able to to apply across our entire environment. So we've been back and forth between slides. You're going to get a template. Tim has put a lot of thought into this template. He and his team have really put together kind of an interesting one with some questions to make you think as you walk through it. Some obvious places where you'll replace some content. That document will go out along with the recording. So if you're here or if you're listening to this on the recording, you will get that document attached to the recording. A little bit to Greg's point, and I'm going to differ from it a little bit. One of the most common pushbacks I always got was, my clients' policies aren't really my problem. We talk about it a lot at Lifecycle Insights because we give folks a tool to do gap analysis. And one of the things we recommend they do is find out where policies and procedures are missing in their client's organization and help the client fill those gaps. So I think we've touched on most of this, but I really want to touch on the revenue opportunity, because helping your clients with policy and procedure is not help desk support.
It's not.
It is not. It is not all you can eat MSP support services.
No, it's a great add-on.
It is a great add-on. It is above and beyond. If you can get someone in your organization to where they're comfortable doing it and they do a good job, it is a real moneymaker. I mean, Tim, you can speak to what folks are charging to help do just a policy engagement for CMMC or some of these other
$300 an hour and out with a 100-hour minimum.
Yeah. I mean, these things they're ridiculous. So there's a lot of money
and they're paying and they're getting it.
Yeah. And then I almost put a unicorn emoji at the end of this line, because for as long as I can remember, talking heads from this industry have stood up in front of us and said, you need to become your client's trusted advisor. I feel like that's everything we've talked about for the last 44 minutes.
Yeah.
is becoming your client's trusted advisor, having some established credibility to come out and have these conversations. Tim's not going to plug it, but I'm going to plug it for him. Tim actually runs a work group of CMMC and compliance type folks from compliancerisk.io. If you ever want to sit down and listen to a group talk about policy and actually not be bored by it, but realize that you're missing some things and that you can improve your life. I sat in on a bunch of those calls and have learned a ton. There are some guys out there who are really sharp. Tim's leading the charge and helping these guys dial in those policies. We walked through incident response plans and built some of that. And these are things that are just challenging. And there's a lot of questions that go into them that if you can ask your clients those questions, they realize how important this stuff is. And not all of your clients will care. To Greg's point, there will be some clients who go, I'm an unregulated industry, please go away. I don't want to talk about it. I told my employees what their password policy is, and they'll abide by it. There will be some folks who say that. You use your judgment to determine if those are the folks you want to work with.
Yeah. So Tim just put a question in chat. Not this Tim Schreier, just put a question in chat. So yeah, cyber awareness, security awareness, like policy quizzes, like employee, like all that stuff is what we're building out as Polygon, and we'll get to the what is Polygon and what we're doing in a few minutes here. But I kind of want to circle back about that trusted advisor, right? So one of the things that and thank you for the plug about our peer group. It's been kind of growing well, and people are learning a lot of really good stuff, and we're being able to share and have this community of MSPs around compliance, and it's not scary. And it's fun, and we're learning. And everybody. Alex, you're even using the right words now, right?
Right. Progress.
So,
right?
But what we learned from that is a lot of MSPs like yourself just don't have the bench strength, right? So, we've done that. Compliance as a service. We come alongside you. We partner with you. We white label with you. We become your compliance division. Don't want to deal with policy? Great. Farm it out to us. We'll work with you and your client. You retain the client. We're not taking your client. We don't want your clients. We want to work with you. Our goal, at least my personal goal in life, is to take the crap in my brain that I've spent 17 years absorbing and help you, Mr. MSP or Mrs. MSP or pronoun MSP, help you.
Pronoun agnostic MSP, yeah.
That help you do this work. So in 5 to 6 to 7 years from now, I don't have to, and I can go hang out with grandbabies.
I kind of have the same goal on the sales and account management side. It's literally just to take all the stuff that's in my brain and transpose it and give it to other people, which is why in a webinar that's 43 minutes, or we're 47 minutes into a webinar, and I haven't let you even get as far as sales pitch yet, because I would rather talk about this stuff that teaches and educates folks. But, I think this trusted advisor thing is legit. Like, we have for so long gone to our customers and tried to convince them why they should care about technology, and we've justified our existence. This justifies your existence. And if you're talking about this, the beauty of this is once you start talking strategy, and we talk about this with IT budgeting to our lifecycle partners, once you get as far as strategy, your client stop paying attention to how many tickets you closed, how many backups you backed up, and how many antiviruses you antivirused, right? They're done. They don't care about that. You're delivering enough value that they understand why they pay you. And that makes a difference in the business that you run.
Yeah.
So
it does.
that's my my soapbox moment there. We will send you the slide deck along with the recording, so you don't have to feel like you got to scribble all these down. But here's a list of 15 policies every SMB should have. I'm going to point out that electronic funds transfer is not on that list, and I would add it to all of them because it's a great talking point to your customers. That's okay. It's a great talking point to your customers. And there are a lot of folks who, look, you could have 475 different kinds of policies, and this could fall into acceptable use policy. It can fall into 27 other policies. Each of these doesn't necessarily have to be an individual document, right?
Well, the WISP, right? So that's why I put the WISP on there, right? Is a sum total of all the individual documents, right? So, and yes, Alex, you make a very good point. These are 15. There's probably 5 million. I'm not going to say, but the electronic funds transfer. Yeah, that was my oops. Forgot to edit the slide.
But it can be 3 lines in another part of a conversation, right? It doesn't have to be a long, complicated policy, and there are different places where it can fit. So just use these lists as not a task to go out and create 15 individual policies for your customer. Use these as a checklist to say, there are certain things that we're going to have to cover with our policies. And one policy may cover multiples of these, and that's okay. I think that's where I was going with that. But we'll send this out to you. It'll give you a few things to just to kick around and think about as you're going through this practice.
Yeah, so I'd also like to recommend that I did put a poll on our Facebook group asking, hey, what do you think the top 5 policy are? And there's been kind of like, this is the sum of like this is kind of the summary of both what I put on LinkedIn and what I put on our Facebook group, the links in chat, what I put on the Facebook group on kind of pulling that all together when we came up with these kind of 15. There's obviously, it's going to depend on the business and the industry, but that's where we can help you along that way.
And Jonathan mentions, look at CIS controls V8. There's a lot of documents and inventories all over it. And I'll tell you, I'm a huge proponent of CIS. Tim's a CMMC guy by trade, but I'm a huge proponent of CIS. I'm a huge proponent of implementation groups, and I think CIS does them better than anyone. If you're not familiar with implementation groups, policy is a great place, a great example of where they apply to things outside of just CIS, right? Implementation groups is the concept of taking something monumental, like writing 15 or 20 or 30 policies and deciding which ones to do in what order. In CIS, the framework is broken down into 3 implementation groups, and you literally start at implementation group 1 and complete it, and start at implementation group 2 and then complete it. So wherever you are in your journey to compliance or to policy writing, as you work your way through something that's grouped in implementation groups, you can take the low-hanging fruit and the easy ones out of implementation group 1. You're done, moving on. Some of your clients will start in implementation group 2 or 3 because they're already more advanced. This is back to compliance is a journey. All cybersecurity is a journey. No 2 people and no 2 companies start in the same place, and it's important to figure out how to start where you are and just get a little better every day. So I love the CIS plug. I do love
CIS too. So you mentioned the peer group earlier. Last summer, we walked all of our MSPs in the peer group literally through IG1, IG2, and IG3 over a several week period, control by control, doing some, education around every control and every group along the way. And, all those recordings are still on the dashboard, but that is something that, CIS is great. By the way, it maps back to NIST in most of those implementation groups. So
a lot of those crosswalks all apply, and it maps fairly closely to HIPAA and some of the other best practices assessments out there. So, nothing scary about those. Realize that when you pull up an assessment and you go look at the CIS controls and you see 100 and how many other 120 now, however many it is, don't be freaked out by it, because you literally do one at a time and do it for one customer. The second time you do it for a second or third customer, it'll just get easier and easier. But the only place to start is where you are. That's kind of the journey conversation. And the same goes for policy and procedure, right? Get your password policy in place. It's an easy one. Start there and work your way through the rest of it. And well, let's step back to that. If you had to pick one that you think everybody should start with, is it password policy or should it be something else?
So it's a really
I want you to start with 14.
No. I would say so. I would say a data governance policy, because it all starts with what do you have, where is it, and who can touch it.
Okay.
Right. So
that's not on your list. So where does that go on your list?
Yeah, I told you I was copy pasta this morning. A couple things.
There you go, data governance. So Tim's going to give you an updated list along with the recording from this webinar. There we go. So what is data governance policy? Finish that up.
Yeah. So data governance, where is your data? Who touches it? How do you get it? What do you do when you get it? Where does it go? How does it flow? All like in these spaces, not even just compliance, but data comes from everywhere, right? Who handles that data? Like when we talk about protecting our business and cybersecurity and our clients' business and cybersecurity, it's all about protecting the data, right? See, data governance, part of CIS. Yes, exactly, Jonathan. That data governance is basically some types of policy backed up by a procedure that says this is what we do with data, how we handle it, who can access it, where it lives, how we share it, user rights around it. Like I could go on and on and on just about data governance.
But why should we have that policy? Back to Greg's question earlier. now all of a sudden we have a policy that says, Mr. Customer, it's not, or Mr. Employee at XYZ customer, it's not okay to go paste sensitive data into a Facebook chat.
Yeah.
Right. Now we've outlined that, and we have a way to kind of control it. So, all right, moving forward, we're cruising through time here. We're going to wrap up, but we talked about a lot of problems. We talked about some things that folks just need to be aware of. You're obviously working on a fix for this. It's something you're really passionate about. So tell us about Polygon.
Yeah, so Polygon is shaping the future of policy process management. When we talked about earlier about the 4 steps of a good policy program, from alignment to authorization to adoption to assessment, which we didn't talk about, which is basically some kind of review cadence, right? We are bringing the SaaS application to you, the MSP, to allow you to manage this whole process. I'm going to use the word life cycle. This whole life cycle.
You're going to have to drink every time you use that word.
And
you fall out of your chair.
Trying really hard not to. So we're bringing that whole process automation into the SaaS application for you as an MSP, for you to be able to manage the process, right? We talk all the time about people, process, technology. If you don't have the people, great, partner with us. We have a team, peer group, or compliance as a service. If you don't have a process, Polygon. Now you have the process and the tool, Polygon, to manage this documentation for you and your clients in a safe, secure SaaS app that will be launching hopefully by IT Nation Connect. If not sooner, we're getting close. And yeah, we're just kind of bringing that whole process into a SaaS-based application to make it easier for you and your clients to manage all this stuff in a centralized location that is safe, secure, and not SharePoint. I'm going to say this, and I'm probably going to say it.
That might be your best. That might be your best feature, not SharePoint.
Not SharePoint, and no more Word documents. I'm doing the no more Word documents. Right, I did that.
Right. So we talk a lot at Lifecycle Insights about automate where you can, and then build process and delegate and streamline where you can't automate, right? Mm-hmm. And it sounds like that's a lot of the concept behind what you're doing here, right? Set up some automated reminders to make sure that people learn when a policy has to get updated or when a new version needs to go out, things like that. So streamline the process, make it easy. Yeah. Take all the heavy lifting out.
Take all the heavy lifting. Like everything that we've done prior to Polygon was all manual. Grab a Word document, store it on SharePoint. Permissions around.
And I want to point out that bottom line, free use at your MSP. So Tim is doing the golden rule thing. Like he's going to give this free to you guys to use internal to your.
Like if you're not doing this on yourself and getting your own house in order, you should be doing this, and we can help you along that way, right? So again, we're getting close to the end of the hour, top of the hour here. As David said, I'm providing a tool that provides insights into your process, right, taking you through the life cycle. But yeah, you can read all of this on our website, compliancerisk.io/Polygon. I want to just refocus and reshift on right now, our early adopter program, the letter of intent that's on that website where you can sign up right now. Not only will you get this free use for yourself, because we're very big proponents on teaching you to fish and giving you the tools to fish, but we're also offering special introductory pricing, which we won't obviously bill until we're starting to roll out, which will be $99 per client per month. So it is very affordable for you to bake this on to a customer for under $100 a month. For each of those customers going forward. Now, it's not going to stay at $100 a month forever. So that's why we're doing this early adopters, not only to show my development team good product market fit, to show interest, but also give you as an early adopter, some buy-in. Like, what are those crowdfunding things where, like, what are those websites? Anyways, gives you an opportunity to save a little bit of money and get in before everybody else and before the price quadruple. No, I'm not quadrupling the price.
Not this week.
No.
So with that, if you guys have questions, comments, if you need anything following up to this webinar, you'll get the slide deck emailed to you. You'll get the recording emailed to you. You'll get an updated list of policies emailed to you, and you'll get Tim's policy template. And Lifecycle Insights is also going to drop you a risk assessment that you can either import into Lifecycle Insights or run on your own to just have a quick policy check-in with one of your clients. So if you know us, you know we're all about assessing the status quo, figuring out where your client lives and how you can improve it. We'll give you an assessment template that is a one-stop policy assessment where you can go down and check the check boxes. And yes, my client has 27% of the policies in place that they ought to. We need to write them a policy engagement, build them for something, and get some billable hours for that account management team or those VCIOs to go out and do some of this work.
To answer John's last question in
Yeah.
chat, my alternative to Word documents is Polygon.
There you go. There you go. And with that, I think that's a great stopping point. So 3:59, we are done.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate everybody coming out.